folks, it's Dr. Christine Sauer here with Sparkles for Better Mental Health Growth in 5 Dimensions. And today I'm very happy to have Amanda Love, what a nice name, on the show. And Amanda just talked to me a little bit. She is a wonderful lady, a holistic nutritionist, and has a lot of experience, personal experience with fibromyalgia and other hazards of life. Tell us a little bit about your story, Amanda, and how you became the person you are today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So I was very sick as a little baby, born 6 weeks early. And I just had constant like sinus infections, sore throats, headaches. And when my parents divorced when I was 6, dad remarried when I was 8 years old. And right away, I could look back now and be like, why didn't I have like any help going through that traumatic experience? My dad married someone, she was going through a divorce, and he was dating her, and she was pregnant with her second, and he married her like a year after the baby was like 1 years old, and then she had like a 2 year old. And at this time, it's like there was a lot of like courts and evil, and she was a very evil person and stuff like that. And I don't say that lightly. I never say that about anybody. And so there was just a lot of not physical but just mental stuff happening. And I could tell, like, on this show, it's all about mental health. And I would, since I was the oldest, I would get told, well, you should speak up. And then if I spoke up, I was the one always in the corner, standing in the corner in the crack. Or I remember one time she being mad at me because she's like, well, the other kids got to go to something, but I had to stay here with you because you're the one who got in trouble. And just like, I remember, and this is something I cried about earlier this year, where I had a healing session with someone at my church, and I had this memory come up of me as a little child, 12, 11, and these, I could still sit, like, picture the room, these blue rocking big armchairs, and my sister and I getting lectured for 3 to 4 hours at a time. And I just broke down crying earlier this year. And it was realization that I needed to heal, and that memory. But I ended up leaving, like, we ended up leaving California and we moved to Arizona. And this was a month before my 14th birthday. But that last year, there was courts, there was all of that. So that takes a toll on a young person's body. And I was sick probably every week or so. 10 days at a time, I would be super sick. And when we moved to Arizona, I started to get better in the sense I wasn't sick every week or so, but it was still 4 or 6 weeks type of thing. And out of high school, I completed a personal training program, amazing program. And I was like, okay, I want to do nutrition. I love nutrition. My favorite show was The Biggest Loser at 14 years old because that's when it started. And I was just like, okay. And I could turn 20 years old like 10 days later. And all of a sudden, I just was so exhausted. I couldn't get out of bed. I was so fatigued. I was so in pain. And then 10 months later, I went to a top rheumatology place in the country, and it was only 20 minutes away and was in Mesa, Arizona. And they were like, you have fibromyalgia. And I was 20 years old.
But What did you think about it then?
So actually, so I was actually diagnosed with this 12 years ago in October. And I think that's a good question because people are like, what did you think? And I think I thought, oh, the doctors are going to get me better. Like I have some relief because I have a diagnosis. And I think that's a lot of what people think when they get a diagnosis. It doesn't matter if it's fibromyalgia or diabetes or heart disease or whatever it is. You feel like the doctors are going to give you an answer.
Hmm.
And the doctors just are like, here's a pamphlet on it. And then they're like, well, we think, and I know I walked out of the room and I knew they were talking about me because I'm very like, I sense things about like, I know when people are talking about me and they're like, I asked my grandmother later and they're like, well, we think she's depressed. Well, of course you're depressed when you're 20. And I have a sister who's exactly 2 years younger than me. Her birthday's on the 6th of January, mine's on the 5th. And I couldn't even hang out with her and her boyfriend, and who is now her husband. And I was like, okay. And the only thing they suggested was medication, which was Cymbalta and Lyrica are the ones that they recommend for fibromyalgia. It's very advertised in America.
That's an
Um,
important thing, right? What's advertised has to work.
well, what's supposed to advertise is supposed to work, and it was like it's a. And if you look it up, there's a good website, and I tell people this website is good to look up side effects of things. It's called drugs.com, and just put the name of the, and it's an antidepressant. That's what it is. At 20 years old, you're gonna put me on that? Then my grandmother, who had done nursing and stuff like that, was like, "You're not staying on this." I don't know how long I stayed on it, maybe a couple days,
How
right?
did you feel on those drugs?
How did I feel? I think I remember nauseated. I really don't feel good when I take anything like
Many people
antibiotics.
report when they take psychiatric drugs, they feel like a zombie. It changes their personality. Was anything?
I think I only took it for a day, so but like I just know I remember feeling like nauseated and off and stuff. It felt weird.
You didn't like it, right?
No, I never, I don't do, yeah, and then a few times I've done like antibiotics, like it's
Yeah.
not been good. And I think that's the thing too, is people think you're not supposed to feel good on these things and stuff, but they just, if you're sick, take care of yourself the natural way and not like rest and like and stuff like that. But the
Let me
other
ask
thing
you,
was,
how did you turn that around? What made the difference? What made you look for a different solution than what the doctor suggested?
um, yeah, what they what turned it around was like I did physical therapy was also something I did, and pain management, which was crazy now I think about it. And the thing that turned it around was them actually, or actually it was my grandmother, because my grandmother got, or I tell everybody she's the biggest driving force to getting me well. And she was like, found a newspaper clipping, and this was 11 and a half years ago almost. And she was like, this was in 2011. So, yeah. And she was like, and the newspaper clipping said a wellness talk by a wellness chiropractor. And it was 10 minutes away, which is totally a God thing. And she went to his talk. He's like, your granddaughter is diagnosed with fibromyalgia. She's only 20. She's been very sick for a very long time. And he was like, that's what my grandmother was like. A light bulb moment went off in her head. And she's like, oh, he gets it. Yeah. And I worked with him for 8 months. And I did stool testing, I did saliva testing, which I hadn't done before, like food sensitivity testing. I found out I had 2 genes predisposed me to gluten sensitivity. Highest in practice at the time. I was 21 years old at the time. Soy sensitivity, I found out, egg sensitivity, dairy sensitivity. But that's the thing too, whereas I tell people like that started to turn it around, and I did other things after that. I did acupuncture and I did vitamin shots and stuff like that. But I think also, I think it just took years. Like I felt better a couple months, but I feel like I was still dealing with sickness, I think too. So I think it takes time for your body. If your body's been like 10, 15 years, 20 years, it takes time for your body to get well. And I realized this past year, it's been a year, last October, after a couple months, I had been in a new state and everything like that. I was like, I got sick in October. I got sick at Christmas time. I was getting sick in January, February. And I'm like, what's the common denominator of why I'm getting sick all the time? And I was getting like sinus infections. And they also say cedar's really bad here in Texas. But I also had gotten an ear infection. I hadn't gotten an ear infection probably like 5 or 6 years. Like I hadn't, and so I was like, what is going on? And then looking at it, I could be like, okay, I have some trauma stuff that needs to be dealt with that is contributing to why I'm getting sick. And so then I did some healing stuff with my church. I did something in April and I was like, okay, this feels good. This is good. I went 4 months without being sick. And then I was like, you know what? Then in July, I had someone I was dating and I had to let that go. But I had to let go of a toxic friendship. And it was a friendship I had for 10 months. And I was like, huh. And then I got sick after that. And I was like, yeah. So that was interesting. And then I was like, huh. So then in like September, I did it again. And then recently, I'm doing a discipleship program. So I just did it like a week or so ago, but I've done it 4 times. This thing, and this thing is just 2 hours with 3 other women, and they're talking to you, and they're like, "What memories are coming up for you that are like?" And they'll be like, "Okay, can you see that like God through those memories? Can you picture Jesus through those memories?" But also the big thing was, can you forgive those people? Do you want to forgive those people for saying horrid, horrid things about you? I had some really crappy, horrid things, especially what the friend was saying, the 10-month friendship that I had to let go in July. That was, and so, and that was the thing. They're like, okay, can you give that person? Can you speak truth into their life? Can you speak a blessing into their lives, which is not always the easiest thing to do, but it's helpful because then you're starting to realize, okay, it's about forgiving them even if they never know it. And interesting enough, I actually had 2 of those people actually try to come back into my life a week or 2 ago. So it's so weird. But yeah, and you're like, but one was just because they wanted to be on my podcast and their sister was reaching out and they didn't, and it wasn't like they were reaching out. And then the friendship I had that was like my closest friendship here, and it was my first friendship here, he reached out to a friend of mine. He's like, well, I want to start, and he had been friends with her too, and he hadn't talked to her same amount of time as me, and but nothing had happened with her. And he's like, "Well, can I have her number and stuff?" And I'm like, I told the friend no. And but that's the thing is he spun it into something else, right? And I said a very nice thing about like I have good friendships and I'm glad he's getting healthy and I wish him the best. And sometimes for your mental health, you have to realize people aren't always going to take whatever you say the way you say it. And as soon as I let go of that friendship with him back in July, like 2 or 3 weeks later, I just felt this inner peace of like, I don't have to worry about what's his going on or like feeling on edge or like him judging me and stuff like that because he was judging me about like who I date, like if I should be married and like just the craziest things. And it's like you have to be careful who you're letting into your life.
That's a good point. And when I summarize what you say a little bit,
Yeah.
you dealing with your trauma, your fibromyalgia, whatever, I don't believe that's even a diagnosis, it's just a
Yeah.
label.
It's just
Uh,
a label.
It's just a label for a symptom complex, like many diseases that they give medication for and that can be healed in another way. Not everything can. If I break my arm, I want conventional medicine.
Right.
If I have symptoms like you, I think, and I commend you for that, your way was a much better way, a much more natural way. And of course, as a naturopath and a doctor, I love both in
Yeah.
their place. And I always talk about 5-dimensional wellness. And I think your story has all 5 dimensions in it.
Yeah.
Because you have a physical aspect, you were tired, you were in pain, you had a
Yeah.
mental aspect, you were struggling with the effects of the trauma, you had a social aspect, you had relationships that hurt you, you had a spiritual aspect because you found your solace in your church, in your belief system, which is awesome. And
Yeah.
probably there's also a financial aspect that is always somewhere in the mix, and they all go together and form a whole. And
Yeah, I think that's the thing is what people don't think about is that people just connect. They think it's just one aspect of your life, and it's like, well, it's all about the food or it's all about physical exercise. Like, those things are a small part of your lives. I mean, food's amazing. I love, and working out's amazing, but sometimes I feel like exercise is like really put high up there and I'm like that's down more. I mean physical exercise is great, you need it, I love it, I love fitness, I'm a huge person for weight training, but like if you haven't dealt with your trauma stuff, everything else I feel like is sort of gonna just you could stay good for on some of the things, but if something trauma comes up, you're gonna fall right off and you're gonna reach for that cookie or reach for the cupcake and stuff. So
I, I totally agree. If your emotions make you eat all the time and you don't deal with that, uh, then you won't be successful. And many people that try to lose weight fall in that pit hole. They try all kinds of diets, they go to the gym for a little bit, and then they give up because the weight all comes back because they haven't dealt with the root causes, which are many. And
yeah, and I think mindset plays such a big part and stuff like that. And people are like, I don't want to work on what my mindset is or what I believe. And it's like, we have habits that we've created as children to protect us from things and stuff like that. When I was sick and stuff like that, I was like really into bean and cheese burritos was my thing. That was a comfort food for me and stuff like that. I don't have that now, but I mean, like, you have comfort foods that you're probably still carrying into your adulthood and stuff like that. And I think that's the thing too. People just don't want to sit down and think about things. They just are like, I gotta go, I gotta do this, this, this. And you miss out on enjoying food, enjoying pleasure of food, and actually relaxing. And it's the best thing ever when you have a meal with somebody and you're actually enjoying that meal and you're not like
On the
rushing.
phone, texting each other while you're eating or wolfing down the food.
Well, it's and the thing is, it's not as and I know this now that I'm by myself. It's just like it's not fun to sit down. You have to make it fun too because it's like put some music on or light a candle or something. You have to make it fun because it's not always fun when you're by yourself and stuff like that. But if you're dating or you're like, I went and I visited my sister back in May, and I commend her for like this because every meal that I was with them, and they do this for at least breakfast and dinner. I mean, the kids are, she has a 7 month old and then she has a 3 year old. And I commend them because they sit down and everybody like has dinner together. Like my sister's like, oh yeah, we at 5 o'clock, everybody's sitting down for dinner. And she's also taught the kids that to eat what they eat. And I think that's the thing too. Like,
That is very important to teach the kids to love the foods that the parents eat and that are in the end, hopefully the parents eat something that's good for them and the kids, like more vegetables and fruits. And
yeah, and I think that's the thing too, where I tell people it's like my 3 year old niece was like, it was like 8 o'clock at night. She's like, I want a milkshake. Well, a milkshake to her is not a milkshake. It's just like almond milk and chocolate and like maybe I don't remember if it was chocolate powder, like a fruit and like something really simple. I don't remember exactly what they put into it, but like that's a milkshake to her and stuff like that. And
it's not
like,
McDonald's, which is sugared
yeah, sugar.
snacks.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. That's what she thinks as a milkshake. Of course, we went to church the next day, and of course, they were passing out donuts. So of course, she had a donut. But does she have sweets very often? No, my sister's like very like knows organic and very my sister's like I'm not gonna have her have sweets. Like they eat super healthy. And of course, she goes to a daycare, so of course you can't control that, but you can control and teach your kids at a young age and at home what you should be putting into your body.
That's a very important point to teach your children what's the right way to eat. And of course, when they go out of the world, they're exposed to all kinds of temptations and to learn how to deal with it. And it's okay to eat a donut every now and then,
Yeah.
but not every day, and then throw cheese, nachos, or some other behind it. That's a good point. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too because I think parents think things are healthy also because I do kid stuff too. And it's like, but they get granola bars or like stuff like Cheez-Its or just like instead of just basic fruit and stuff like that. So you have to be careful what it says and look at the ingredient list. And
Yeah.
really, if you really shouldn't have an ingredient list for things, really should just have natural fruits and stuff like that. So really looking at that ingredient list and saying, okay, what is in there? Is it sugar? What's the first ingredient? It's probably sugar.
Yeah, and there's tons of names of sugar. I have actually a little worksheet for my clients that I give them where there's all the names for sugar that you find of the ingredient list. I think it's 100 or close to. It's
Wow.
unreal what all they call sugar, so they don't have to put it right all on top. They can spread it a little over the label. It's ridiculous. Now, I love that you say that as a young person, because many young people nowadays, they are so absorbed with playing computer games that they just throw some food in there that's easy to make. Now, I know you do a lot of meal planning too. And I think part of eating healthy in a short period of time when you're also working, and many families have work, involves meal planning is a big part. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's the thing too. And I think when people hear meal prep, they get scared. And I'm like, why? We don't make things, my whole thing is don't make things complicated. And you don't have to meal prep every single meal. I think that's the thing too. But like, do you have a spare hour? Like when you get home from the store, do you have a spare time just to cut it all the vegetables up, cut it all up? So then put the seasonings on it and do all that and put it in Ziploc. Put it in like I do glass containers are always the best. And then at whatever time, then you could just throw it into the oven. Or can you do that? Can you cook a bunch of chicken and use the chicken for maybe a soup or like a salad or whatever? Like multitasking is so important. But I tell people, why do we overcomplicate it? You don't need a recipe that's like 20 ingredients. Unless you love to cook and stuff, and you don't want recipes that maybe are like, well, it has a other thing to it, unless it's maybe like a salad dressing type thing. But I think the thing is, it's really simple just to throw things into a crock pot, make a soup, have a soup for a couple days, throw I'm big on just like throwing sweet potatoes, vegetables into the oven. That's easy. I feel like that complicating it is what scares people, so then they don't take action. And if you're starting with meal prep, don't do meal prep with all the meals at once. Get into a rhythm of meal prepping. So maybe one day you order your groceries and stuff like that. And that's a nice thing to do is order your groceries because then you're not tempted to get the sugary stuff, not going down those aisles. But then maybe then a couple days later, you're like, well, I have that day to meal prep. So look at your schedule and be like, okay, Monday nights, I have something going on. Can't meal prep that night. But Thursday night, I can meal prep or Friday night, right? And I think starting with 2 meals and for a couple weeks and then getting into a rhythm and then maybe adding a different breakfast or whatever. But what is the hardest meal for everyone to cook healthy is dinner time. So I feel like that's the one that everybody should start with because
Hmm.
we don't want to be at 5 o'clock be like, okay, it's time for
What's
dinner.
for
And
dinner? It's 5 o'clock. We are hungry. What can we eat?
yeah, what's for
Oh, let's just
dinner?
order pizza
Yeah, what's for dinner at 5 o'clock? And then you're like, well, okay. And then you have your 6-year-old saying, what's for dinner? And you're like, oh, great. We need to go to gymnastics practice at 6:30, and I only have 30 minutes to cook, and there's homework and whatever and all that.
That's
You
a good
don't want,
point. Very good point.
and I think that's the thing too is look at your schedule and be like, okay, my kids have this, and I feel like a lot of times I think making sure we don't over schedule ourselves too, where we have some time on the weekend. Do we have like even for me, I'm like as someone who doesn't have kids but is single but is like is dating someone is like I'm like, okay, I can't have every single night of the week busy. So I'm like, okay, so what night, and this is what parents need, but like everybody needs, we need downtime. What's a night that you just have downtime?
Mm.
What's a night that's your mental health night, right? Where it's like reading a good book, or even if it's just watching a TV show, something you enjoy doing, or taking a bath, right? What day is your mental day to just relax? You should take time to have some mental something every single day. So
Some
it maybe,
self-care activities like that
yeah.
can help.
Well, yeah, but what's something extra you could do, maybe, or a little more time and stuff like that? Just take a break, and then maybe what is your night to do a little meal prep, or maybe twice a week a little meal prep or something like that.
Right, and I think it's also important to have cut up vegetables and
Yeah.
ready. So when the hunger comes, that you don't grab a chocolate bar because you have nothing else in the house, and you don't really want to start washing and cutting up vegetables then when the hunger hits you and you want to eat something, but there's something in the fridge where you can just help yourself.
Yeah, and that's why I have like so many glass containers, because I'm like, I'm just already like, and I think that's the thing too, is it's nice to have a lot of glass containers, so you're like, okay, it's all in these glass containers, all ready for me to go and stuff like that too. Now, some weeks you're gonna have off weeks, and I think that's the thing too, where life's crazier, busier. So then maybe you have a little slower week the week before, and you can meal prep for next week and stuff like that. I think finding a balance, because you're not always going to be perfect, you're not going to have certain days, but looking at your schedule and be like, okay, Tuesday nights I'm going to meal prep for a few hours and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Looking at your schedule is the biggest thing.
Those are good tips, Amanda, and I'm sure when the listeners hear that, some of them will say, what does Amanda do? Can I contact her if I want to learn something about that? What do you say? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so I have a podcast. It's called Physical Emotional Health Secrets. I have a Facebook group, Physical Emotional Health Secrets. And social media is a great way to contact me. And it's Amanda Elise Love, and which is also my email, and it's at gmail.com. So any way to learn about, like, if you want to work with me one-on-one consultations and like help you realize, okay, I need help with the mindset, I need help with the food, or I need help with the cooking. And I also do online cooking classes, in-person cooking classes. So depending on if you're in Austin or stuff like that, we could talk about like things we could do, like grocery shopping and stuff like that too.
So that is wonderful, and I will make
Yeah.
sure to share your contact information under the video and in the resources.
Yeah.
Let's wrap that up. Thank you so much, Amanda, for being a guest on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
And this was another episode of Sparkles for Better Mental Health. Make sure to tune in for the next episode. Bye bye.